I remember the tattered family photos spread across the dining room table. My grandfather sinks back into his chair and recounts with such delight the stories of his brothers who every winter launched their wooden sled down the icy streets of Data Bistro, Romania. There's his grandmother who, with worn and calloused hands, kneaded large round breads for his lunch, and his father, who walked to synagogue every Saturday only for a chance to hear the enchanting voices of the choir. And of course, there's the girls with long, beautiful hair who plan secret parties when their parents go out of town. We close our eyes and envision a rabbi, a Shabbos, an entire community. But as my grandfather's story comes to an end, I feel the darkness envelop these brief smiles of the past.
Ihr schließt euch den Kolonnen an und wir wissen, vor uns liegt Deutschland, in uns marschiert Deutschland und hinter uns kommt Deutschland.
Well, there is this building at the entrance to Birkenau, to the camp. And in the middle of the building is a big arch. And underneath the arch, railroad track. This is how all the wagons filled with Jews, packed, full, men, women, and children. And the journey took three days. By the end of the 3 days, there were bodies lying around your feet. And then we had to, we arrived to one point, about 200-300 meters from the car, maybe not even that far. And there were 2 German officers waiting for us. And all they did is right, left, right, left. They just pointed at you, right, left. My father and I and my brother to the right, my mother to the left. And we were walking slowly because we all looked to our mother. And I noticed my mother walked about 10 meters, and then she stopped looking for us. And then she walked another 10-20 meters, she stopped and looking for us. And she kind of walked backwards just so she can see us. And as I was coming towards these 2 German officers, I saw a huge chimney, which was full of smoke and fire. And I couldn't think of anything else, but it's a bakery.
This is my mother and I receiving our inheritance. My grandfather's story. It's one that will join the thousands of others that have accumulated in order to offer a Jewish world to the next generation. Passing the stories on is all part of a tried and tested system. It's a whole factory put into the works 3,000 years ago to ensure long-term survival. It's a maxim, 80,000 words long, meticulously copied, inscribed on the doorpost of the house and on the gate, repeated over and over again, year in and year out. It was my grandfather's, it was my mother's, and now it's mine.
It was already getting dark. And they take us into a barrack. And by that time, I lost my father and I lost my brother because it was such a stampede. And they were pushing us from the back, these so-called helpers, the workers. And they were Jewish. But in the back of them was the SS, urging them what to do. If they didn't, my God, that was the end of them. So here we come into this place. We had to take all our clothes off. And in the last minute I'm in the ghetto, my father urged us to put a coin here and a coin there. So we have something valuable in our clothes, just in case an emergency, something valuable, a piece of silver, a piece of gold, a ring, we sewed it into the jackets. In 1 minute, all disappeared. We had to undress, then they shaved all the hair off of us. Head and other places, they shaved all the hair off. And then they put us through a shower that had disinfectant in it. So we were disinfected, and as we walked out from the showers, there was the uniforms waiting for us. The striped uniform, everything was so fast.
When the Moyle makes his first incision, your fate is sealed. You've been inducted, made a proud member of the longest, most continuous tradition the world has ever known. And these stories become your gift. But they're not just for your listening pleasure. No, they come with an order. Remember them. Only this can make all the suffering worth something. At every Jewish service, you can hear them pounding the drum. Remember, remember, remember. The words, the names, the faces of the dead.
Well, guess where we marched? On the side of a pit that was smoldering with bodies. Huge pit as far as you could see. It was night. The smell hit me. And I figured, okay, that's where we're going. I figured this is going to burn us, but it wasn't so. What they did, my column, they made us walk just a couple miles. That was the main camp, Auschwitz.
And of course, you must teach them faithfully to your children. These stories of death and suffering, pass them, tell them, together relive them again. And if you don't, could you ever live with yourself, knowing that you broke the chain after an eon of persecution, after the Romans, the Babylonians, the Spanish Inquisition, the Nazis? All of these horrors endured, survived, so that you could have a Torah, a Talmud, a God. But it just wasn't for me.
After I took a place there, and then I went to the window. There were some windows there. And there was another older inmate that already was there, a Polish Jew, Polish Jews. And I said to him, how do you escape from here? It's the first thing I asked him. He was looking at me, and he was pointing out the window to the chimney. By that time, the chimney was red on top, because it was dark, and you could see the flames. He said, oh yeah, you can escape, and you will, through that chimney. That was the introduction.
As you might have guessed, my grandfather escaped, but not through the chimney. On a rainy night in 1945, while he was being marched across Bavaria by the Nazis in their vain attempt to escape the rapidly approaching Soviets, he managed to separate from his column. He crawled under the barbed wire that skirted the temporary camp, snuck into a deserted barn, barely alive. Inside, he survived on raw chicken eggs, the best meal he had had since he left home. He knew that at any moment, the Germans might discover him, and his year-long struggle to survive would be for naught. Luckily for him, Patton's Third Army found him first. He weighed only 90 pounds, suffered severely from dysentery and tuberculosis, and spent the next 3 years recovering in a German sanatorium. Within a matter of months, every single member of his family, save 2 of his brothers, had been murdered. Everyone was gone. Everything was gone. There was no reason to go home. His brother Ozias made one last trip to Data Bistra and sold the dilapidated family house in 1948. My grandfather never returned. Instead, he journeyed to America, settled in Denver, Colorado, where the Rockies reminded him of his native Carpathians. Then came a daughter, a son-in-law, and then me and my sister. And again, there was a sled, and girls with beautiful hair, and late-night parties when the parents went out of town. A rabbi, a Shabbos, a community. Imagine that. Even after all the death and destruction, the world for Jews remains very much the same, down to the stories themselves. I attended this Jewish school when I was a child. This may look like your average daycare, but I assure you it's not. It's a training session, getting these kids ready to take up their responsibility to remember.
Okay, boys and girls, we're sitting down because we're having our own Passover Seder this morning. Have you been learning a little bit about that in your classes? Yes, you have. So we're going to go through some of it so that you can understand what we're doing. Okay? Let me just quickly tell you the story. A long time ago, very far away, there was a land called Egypt. And the Jews lived in Egypt a long time ago. The Jewish people, a lot of them, okay? They were not treated very nicely. They were treated as slaves. Do you know what that word means? Well,
the Jewish people have a certain genius for history, but genius does not come without its cost.
So every holiday has within it memorial. It has within it remembrance.
If you look up here, you see a Seder plate. It's hard to see it though. Thank you. And the parsley, boys and girls, we did that in salt water. And all of you have 3 cups, okay? That's the salt water. Salt water on your plates, teachers, if you see that. And once again, parsley symbolizes springtime, but the salt water symbolizes tears. Who can tell me why we would be dealing with tears? Why would we be sad? It makes us think about being sad.
To be specific with Passover, we do it all as a reminder of the fact that we were slaves in Egypt, and each of the symbols has a specific way of helping people to understand what slavery was about. For example, we have bitter herbs, maror, which is horseradish, and we're supposed to really take a chunk of horseradish so that when we eat it, we are reminded of how difficult and how bitter life can be in slavery.
Each year, that framework of remembering is informed by a different set of circumstances. So that each year, instead, it says in the Haggadah, in the text that we read at the Passover Seder, quoting again, I think, a biblical verse that says, "And you will tell your son on that day that it's because of what God did for me when I came out of Egypt." So that it's not telling them about what happened 2,000 years ago in Egypt, although that's a part of it, that's one dimension, but it's also telling my children what happened to me when I got trapped and how I got out and what it was in my situation, which is really the same thing as my memory.
Auschwitz was my grandfather's Egypt. So it became one more story to remember. But it was not enough just to know the story. My mother once called me home after school. I was 8. She told me she had something important to show me. It was an after-school special on the Holocaust. So I sat and watched the grainy photos of corpses flashing on the screen. The innumerable bodies of Auschwitz, Dachau, and Theresienstadt. At the time, I felt I didn't understand what it meant. So I returned to the playground. One thing kept bugging me, though. Why was it that all the corpses had smiles on their faces? Years later, I realized that they hadn't been smiles at all. They had been screams. That's when I knew what the Holocaust was. My responsibility to continually remember would be too much for me to bear. I had to find a way to break free from the past. Leave behind the stories and the traditions, the painful memories. I could no longer live with the commandments to remember. I wanted to forget. I never wanted to hear again about either Egypt or the Holocaust. I knew that if I could shed the image of me in my 8th grade school picture, gold chai and all, unmistakably a Jew, perhaps I could be free. So, much to my mother's dismay, I stopped attending synagogue. I disappeared into the glow of skyscrapers and a haze of cigarette smoke. but I can't escape. No matter how much I read Nietzsche or stay out all night, I'm still tied to the duty of memory. It seems to me that I'm no different than any of my friends, Jewish or not. We all went to the same schools. We all go out to the same Friday night hotspot. We all dress the same, know the same kinds of songs, come from the same kinds of homes in the same kinds of neighborhoods. There doesn't immediately seem to be any kind of difference. But I know I'm different. The past lives on. I feel I still owe something to those that died for me. All the time, the memory seems more and more unsettling. The more I try to ignore it, the more it overcomes me. And look at me now. If my great-great-grandfather Yitzhak could see me now, what would he think? Would it have been worth it for him that we survived? Just to assimilate? No more a people among peoples, but just people. With no commandment to remember. No tool to hold on to the past, to the traditions that meant life itself to them. Their faces are captured there, permanent, asking me tenderly if their lives meant anything at all. And these frozen expressions will soon fall with equal resolve upon my children, and their children, and their children. How can I ease these ghosts? How can they be done honor? Not just them, but 6 million. In the summer of 2006, my grandfather decided it was time to prove we still existed, that we could still go home. So we went back to the old country, to Data Bistra, Romania, to find his grandfather's house. My grandfather had not been back to the place of his birth since 1943, before Auschwitz, before his family had been reduced to memories. What did he hope to find there? There would be no Jews there. No one commanded to remember. Surely there would be nothing left for us. Maybe we could serve as a reminder for the people there. Maybe then I would feel I had done enough.
In every of these villages, almost everyone had a Jewish population. You know, the Deda Bistra, I would say there were about maybe 10 families, Jewish families, no more. Well, I tell you what happened once. I liked to go to school. And one day the teacher said, we're going for an excursion Saturday. So I told my grandfather about the excursion, that tomorrow morning I want to get up early, go excursion. He said, no way. It's Saturday. And you are going to no excursion. He was a real religious fanatic. And I was so excited. I never been on excursion, okay? And what did I do? I sneaked out. Oh boy. And I went to the excursion. And I had a hell of a good time. I even remember the song that the teacher were teaching us when we were singing it. And it was Floricele pe câmpii, hai să ne adunăm copii. So it had it was an immense, beautiful day for me. I never experienced anything like that.
And it was all because you didn't stay in on Shabbos.
And the fields were full of flowers. You know, it was just a very beautiful day. So when I came home, my grandfather was very angry, was screaming at me, and he said, "You know what? You will burn in hell because of this."
He was a little mixed up, I think.
And I thought to myself, with my 8 years, I thought to myself, who is going to burn me because I went on the excursion?
For him, it's no new problem to want to break from tradition, from the past. The commandments are too much to bear. Neither of us can wait for the excursion into the unknown, to desire, to be among the flowers. My grandfather often tells the story of the last time he was in Data Bistra. In 1943, he came for a short trip with his brother to visit his grandparents and the house where he had grown up. They got off the train here, in what used to be called Data Halta. It had been 63 years since my grandfather had laid eyes on it.
Come on, all of you. Well, this is we got off the train. And that was a brother that was 2 years older than I am. Henrik was his name. Yeah, that was Henrik. His heart was too soft. That's the reason he didn't survive. I don't know if I ever told you. There was one survivor from my hometown that he was together with him in the camp. In the last 3 days before the liberation, you hear, they knew that liberation might be imminent, you know, that they are close. So this guy tells me, he's a dentist now in Haifa. He tells me that he remembers him sitting down, Leibush was his Jewish name, Leibush, sitting down and saying that, I don't want to live. I don't want to survive. I don't want to live in a world like this. And he died. He just gave up.
That's it. That's it.
Bistra, that's it.
That's it. This is it.
That's it. And look how beautiful it looks. Yeah. You know, 1943 we walked here.
Yep.
And the Allied troops already landed in Sicily. And we thought, you know, it's after Stalingrad and all that, we thought we are safe, Jews here in Romania. And Hungary, it was Hungary here, let's not forget that. But we learned differently. Took another year and they took us to Auschwitz.
Would the river orient you?
Yeah, I was
river?
just thinking about that.
This is the bridge
If
right
we,
here.
This is the bridge.
Where?
Right
About
here.
to go over.
We're going over a bridge. Here's,
Yeah. Oh shoot.
But we're going to go back
It's
in.
okay.
I hope we have another bridge, but I don't know.
it's okay. We'll go back. We'll walk around.
This is just to get
Because it
oriented.
is before the bridge. But I wonder if we have another bridge.
Over
There's
here, the
more
river
water.
on this side also.
Yeah?
Yeah. This looks bigger. The other one looked like a creek.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this looks more like a river.
Immediately, I saw a change in him. The man who usually is in total control became panicked. He didn't remember anything. So we stopped to ask the first person we saw. Subsequent viewings of this footage have made me feel like this was staged. Some elaborate coincidence too good to be true. Something only in stories. But here it is.
Bună ziua, doamnă!
bună ziua!
Eu m-am născut aici, domnul v-a spus, cred.
Da,
Și-
acum iertați-mă, cum vă zice dumneavoastră, ca totul să mă...
Familia Metzler.
Metzler, da, am auzit.
Da?
Da.
Vai de...
Și unde? De-aia v-a zis că Lelea Mare și...
Lelea Nuță?
Sau Lelea...
Din jos.
Da, numai puțin. Da, cum se televiza, adică n-am înțeles.
Și nu the grandparents.
How wonderful.
Ați stat acolo pe răzor, acolo în căsuța aia, sau unde mai în jos,
După pod.
după pod. La cine? Nu la Ghidiu.
A fost casa lor acolo. A vândut-o, fratele meu a vândut-o la cineva, dar nu știu cum se cheamă. Dar vis-a-vis a locuit Bade Ion și Lelea Nuță.
Știu, Alionul lui Toader.
Da?
Da.
She remembers Lelea
Da.
Nuță.
Toate asta.
Nu, tu n-ai de unde ne luăm.
Unde
Nu.
vine asta? Unde vine asta?
Unde stă Silvia lui Duța?
Da.
Da. Când ați plecat
Da.
dumneavoastră din Bistra, de aici?
Ungurii ne-a luat la Auschwitz.
Știu. Noi am plecat în România, tot atunci când ne-au scos din căsa afară. Că aici s-au făcut minări și treburi, au băgat armată și noi n-am mai avut.
Well, she said that her father was also
Știți
taken
cine
by the
m-a mai
Hungarians.
Știți cine m-a mai căutat? O fostă colegă de școală, de
Da,
clasă,
da.
Hirsch Dorina, după bărbat.
Hirsch.
Da.
El a avut o prăvălie.
Da.
What?
This is a guy, this is a Jewish family, Hirsch.
Doi era cel din jos și cel din sus. Schwarz, Dorina, ăștia mă tot. De ce plâng?
What? Tell me.
He's crying.
What happened? Tell me.
M-a căutat acum 2 ani cu băiatul. Cu băiatul ei.
She had no obligation to remember. No obligation to tell her stories to us. She was no Jew. She had never been commanded to remember in synagogue, but she did nonetheless. Jewish names, Jewish faces, Jewish stories.
When I went to school. I could be right here somewhere.
La fabrica asta de la Bistra.
Oh, asta de fabrica de lemn.
Da.
The director, that means the manager of the sawmill, which was a great sawmill.
Was the lifeblood of the town.
That's, ce a fost numele lui? Lander. This guy did a lot of good to my grandparents. I remember Piri telling me that I didn't remember the name or anything.
Lander.
See, actually
Nu
he
mai
was Jewish, the
explica
director
asta
of the
avea.
sawmill. And that's his daughter. Landler. That's his daughter. Asta, spuneți vă rog, a venit înapoi asta de la Auschwitz? sau
Nu mai știu nimic.
Nici Lander, nici unul.
Nu. Sunt
They didn't come
de
back.
Dora, de Dorina atâta. Dorina, nici asta nu mai veni. Rozale au fost omorâți la Auschwitz.
Aha. Cine este asta?
Eu.
That's her.
Da.
That's her right here. This one.
Eram toată clasa 6-a.
Uh-huh. This is a 6th year.
Seamăn.
Da, semănați. She wants to know if she resembles it.
No,
Yeah,
și aici,
yes,
le-ați
certainly.
tras un pic pe...
Da.
Trageți.
Yeah.
Luați
A tras.
fratele lui, adică băiatul lui Dorina, o tras
Boy,
toate pe...
she is the jewel. I mean, she's going to take me to all these places. But how are you going to handle it?
You get in the front seat, and you and Lee.
Okay.
Then she can get in the back seat with you.
Okay. Okay.
So what is...
Deocamdată memoria nu mă lasă.
Ah, ce bine.
Și am 78 de ani.
Da, foarte bine.
Am făcut acum în 12 iulie 78 de ani.
Acum veniți cu noi?
Până unde? Până în America?
Sure. Încet, încet. Nu vă grăbiți.
Nu-i nicio grabă.
Întâi mergem acolo.
Aici,
Știți unde a fost moara? O moară?
aici.
A fost vis-a-vis.
Unde?
A fost vis-a-vis de la...
Nu aici?
Nu aici. Moment.
Na. Aici locuia Ghidiu. Andrei.
Unde merge râul ăsta?
Spre Mureș.
Merge,
Nu. Râul
merge în
ăsta
spate, în spate caselor ăștia.
Da, ne oprim aici în gura uliței. Aici.
Here,
Aici,
stay here
imediat.
for a minute.
Pull over.
Aici imediat.
Here was a very primitive synagogue. This is where it was. It was an old house.
Știi ce e acum aici?
Da.
Se spală, e vâltoarea aia care spală covoare.
Trebuie să aflu unde a fost moara. Pentru acolo a fost casa bunicilor.
But it was on this stream.
I don't think...
Mai e ceva rămas din moara care sunt aici. Din moara care sunt, nu mai e nimic. Că dumnealor...
Ce departe a fost moara de aici?
Aici, în grădina asta de aici.
În grădina asta?
Dar nu știu dacă se poate merge pe aici. Că eu nu știu. Nu știu.
She says yes, there was a mill here.
La Tornea, dacă întrebați de aici din Bistra, știu să vă spun exact.
Ăștia sunt mai în vârstă.
Sunt în vârstă, da.
Vă rog frumos, arătați-o.
Vă arăt cum.
Okay, merci.
What is she saying?
She said that this is where it was. There used to be water there too, which is no longer. And this is where the mill was. But now, there are some gypsies living there. This is probably the house, the neighbor's house. She said that this house here burned down. She said that the sawmill caught fire, and that's why this house burned down. Okay?
Which house was that?
My grandfather's house.
Oh, it was right here? Burned? Had we come all this way across an ocean and half a continent just to find that nothing remained? That everything had been forgotten? We went to look for older people. Could anyone remember?
Vă rog frumos, ați auzit vreodată despre Lelea, Anuță și Bade Ion?
Care au avut moara aici.
Nu a avut moara. Ei a locuit aici, vis-a-vis de la noi. Casa a fost aici.
Aici strada, doamna Florea, nu știu altceva să vă spun. Aici.
48. A vândut casa bunicilor, care a fost vis-a-vis. Vis-a-vis, da.
Aici eu am prins Marcu, pe Marcu m-am prins, doi oameni bătrâni, morți amândoi. Adică Marcu
A avut o verandă din lemn acolo, două ferestre aici la stradă.
Sofia. Sofia, dar de la cine a cumpărat Sofia, nu știu. Aici era fundația căsii acolo.
In the 70s there was a fire.
72 ani de aici.
And what was left from the fire was taken by flood water.
În 82 tu.
So everything is gone.
It looked like this house would have been
Deci
very
era
prone to
arse
flooding. It was
cu
way down there. And
It was on the street.
Pe școală băieți și pleacă bătrân. Este aici mai la vale, la o casă.
Da? Poate să găsim.
Eu una nu mă duc. Dacă, la Vasile Leon zice. La Pișpiren, un drum. Este un păr mare, bătrân. Dar vi-l arăt, hai să vi-l arăt. Dar eu nu pot să mă duc, că sunt în conflict cu familia. Uitați părul, nu?
Asta, acolo.
Uitați părul aici. Uitați acolo în drum, nu? Acolo clățile alea. Acolo e un păr mare, bătrân. Acolo e un păr bătrân. Da, acolo e părul bătrân. Am avut în Marghinică unde e părul.
Bine.
Dar ăla e un păr bătrân.
Bine.
What does she say?
Foarte
What does she
bun.
say?
There is an old man, real old man living in that house. Maybe he can give me.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Acolo. Că se vede părul, de aici, tulpina. Chiar acolo casa
Cum
aia.
se cheamă?
Demian.
Demian.
Hai că te rămă bază în curți.
Vă rog frumos.
Evident. Stai să iem, așa.
He goes to find the old man. If he can't find the old man, she said, there is an elderly woman who moved here in 1940. That would be okay. Because the house was sold in 1948. My brother sold the house. So maybe this is a little confusing. They say that the mill was there, close to the road. Can't be.
Memory wasn't like that.
Can't be. Because let's say this is the house of my grandparents, yes? Next door neighbor was the owner of the mill. And that was
The mill was behind him.
behind him. There was a garden, and after a pretty good sized garden, and after that was a river. He is 88 years old.
Uh-huh.
He bought this house here many years ago, over 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And he tells me
Asta a cumpărat în 45 când a căsătorit casa asta.
45.
1904 am dat pe 222 de bani. Ca să iau o vacă 10.000.
Aha.
Da, am făcut la ei.
He
Eu am
bought
stat
this
5 ani pe pote.
in 1945. That means
Și acum
after
am
the
necazul.
deportation. So he doesn't
Am
know
avut
the...
o fată, un fișorul cu facultate, l-a omorât de 50 de ani, un hoț,
Cine
un
l-a
bandit.
omorât?
O fată mi-a omorât-o la 50 de ani, 52 de ani, o omorât-o și a rămas singur.
Amândoi a fost omorât de niște
E un
hoți.
hoț de un bandit care încă nu-i judecat. De 6 ori am fost la judecată în Târgu Mureș, dar încă nu-i judecat. Din 3 familii aici mi-au luat și fata omorâtă, fișorul omorât și a rămas singur. Nevasta ne-a murit la 78 de ani.
His wife
De aia
was
au
also,
murit
is also
bine,
dead
săraca,
at 78. He's 88.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's all alone. He's very down because of his son that had high positions here. And he was killed by a thief. And he's all alone. Right? Now, I like to give him some money.
Yeah. You think?
I like to give
50?
him 50, yeah. 50 is what, 500? I tell you what, this to him is a lot of money.
Just under $10.
Să fiți sănătos. Ați fost vecini cu bunicii mei,
Stați aici.
dar nu l-a cunoscut
Așa
pentru
pot să
că...
vă servesc un pahar de apă bună, dulce.
De la fântână?
Nu.
De unde?
Nu stați că, uite, să vezi. Un pahar de apă bună, dulce.
De unde e apa asta?
Comparată de mine, las că eu am fost președinte 20 de ani. 5 al ministru. No, stați numai.
What is he talking about that's sweet?
Dulce.
Dulce. Water dulce means clear water.
Okay.
From
We're going to have it.
what source?
How nice.
My God,
Foarte
it's so
bună.
dirty.
No, it's just from,
Serviți-vă cât vă place.
I'm going to go with this two.
Așa, domnule, să...
Okay. I don't want it to reach the dirt. I'll drink it. I'll just give it.
I'll have some.
Okay.
Ui, că e apă clasa întâi de bună. Lasă, domnule, să-ți pui acolo să bei un par de apă.
Merci.
Okay, merci. Don't touch that rim. Don't touch the rim.
Da, mă, să mă pun, mă,
Merci.
vezi.
No.
Da, mă,
A little more?
No, clar și cum am beut, am venit aici. Vă mulțumim foarte mult. Să știți că dumneavoastră
Dragul meu.
v-ați mutat aici. Vecinii aici a fost evreu și a fost deportat în 44 la Auschwitz.
44?
Da.
Dumneavoastră... Rămân că tot în 45.
Domnească un cat, să nu l-ai cunoscut. Să fiți sănătos, pare rău de fiu.
Dragii mei, Dumnezeu din cer să vă ajute.
Spune, dear
frumoasă,
people,
oameni
he said,
frumoși, oameni cinstiți,
God has sent you.
cinstă și omenie, Dumnezeu să vă ajute.
God should help
Dă-ne,
us,
Doamne,
whatever we
sănătate
Merci,
la toți.
merci.
Să rămână.
To him this is a lot of money, you know? A lot of money, probably.
Indicted but not tried. It occurred to me that Damien and his lingering tooth is not all that different from me. I'm not the only one that has victims calling from the past for justice.
Doamna, vă rog frumos să vedem dacă vă mintiți din copilărie. V-ați mutat aici când?
Poftiți?
La ce an v-ați mutat aici?
Eu am venit aici în anul 48.
48 a venit.
Atunci a vândut fratele meu casa bunicilor.
Dar cine a fost fratele casa?
Metzler.
Metzler. Noi am cumpărat casa de la două nepote de al lui Metzler, care a rămas de la familia Metzler.
Wow!
What?
Ei a fost plecați, familia a murit în Germania.
La Auschwitz!
Două nepote a rămas în viața.
Eu sunt unul
din nepot
și celălalt a vândut casa. Osia!
No.
What?
She knows the name of my brother, that he sold the house. A spus că a vândut casa la oameni foarte cum se cade.
Da.
Foarte
și
bun.
omul a fost foarte, foarte cum se cade. Că noi când am cumpărat, am stat
Ați
la
cumpărat
billboard.
de la el?
S-a dus soțul meu la Oradea, cineva a spus că este casa de vânzare a...
Da.
Casa era foarte distrusă, fără geamuri, câteva uși lipsa, altul era descoperit, cineva, ce știu cine a descoperit. Înainte de Crăciun a venit Osias la noi, un băiat foarte frumos și a dormit...
Fratele meu.
De fratele noastre.
Da.
Și a stat aici vreo 3 zile la
Aud
noi.
pelea așa neagră puțin.
Băiat frumos.
Da.
A stat vreo 3 zile la noi și
Da, cu 2 ani mai
încă
tânăr
i-am
decât
spălat
eu.
cămași și am aspirat, dar am apretat și așa de bine i-a spus că aici nu știe nimeni să apreteze cămășile. Eu i-am apretat cămășile. Și a stat la noi până i-am mai făcut restul de bani, că trebuia să mai dau cu 68.000, trebuia să le dau. Am făcut ce am putut și am dat toți banii și băiatul a plecat și a spus că pleacă în Israel.
Asta e, acolo locuiește acum.
În Israel?
În Haifa.
Nu vedeți? Acum din
Da,
necaz de bani.
da.
Da. Nu, și așa.
So, atunci dumneavoastră ați cumpărat de la el.
Noi, da.
What?
She's the one that bought the house from Ozias. That's his Romanian name. Ozias.
She bought the house?
Yes, she bought the house. Arătați-mi casa, vă rog.
Dar
And
casa,
where is it?
Noi am stricat casa. Poftiți,
Da,
vă
îi duceți.
Where's the
Ba,
house?
cum să nu? Casa, cum vă spun, a fost, aici a fost două camere în față.
Două ferestre.
Da, două camere.
Și a fost o verandă
Și
în
veranda,
spate.
Da.
Arătați-mi.
Tot. Și noi...
Ați văzut?
Vedeți? Dacă mă duc...
Vai
Wait a
de
minute.
mine.
Where's the house?
Asta e casa sa următoare.
Aici.
She said
Nu m-au
they
modificat.
remodeled it. Instead of the 2 windows, now there is 1 window.
But this is it. This is the house.
Da, aici.
This is the house.
Duh.
Yes!
This!
Vedeți? Devine
Vai
Yeah.
de mine.
We had found the past. It was alive and well in Data Bistra.
But he said the house was in very bad shape. Okay? And I said to her, well, listen, it had 2 windows. She said, we redid the whole house. She said, we took it all apart because everything was falling down, the foundation was falling down. So we took it all apart and we cleaned all the ceramics, all the bricks. One by one, she said, we cleaned them all. But then we didn't, it was a big house, she said. So there were a lot of bricks. And we didn't have enough money to construct the house, so we sold half of the bricks.
Holy smokes.
So that way we could build the smaller house.
So there's nothing really remaining of the old structure then? They completely
Nothing.
did it over and...
What'd she say?
Listen,
Yeah.
this is where they kept 2 cows.
Your grandparents?
Yes.
Same.
Here.
Da. Da. Noi l-am stricat că în timpul războiului oamenii au luat țiglele de pe graj și a plouat câțiva ani și a fost rău. Și
She said that the house
da. Și noi am
during
stricat
the war
și am făcut.
was ransacked.
Da.
You know, after my grandparents was taken away, she said whatever they could steal, they stole a lot of stuff, wood and all that. Dar asta e original, nu?
Nu. Nimica nu mai este original.
Și aici a fost grădina.
Da, aici e grădina, poftiți să vedeți.
Still here, the grădina, the garden.
Oh, let's go, let's go.
This is the way to the river.
Stați că poate nu știți. Așa trebuie ridicată. Dacă nu am sos, apoi se strică.
Vai de mine, asta e drumul la râu.
Nu, poftiți, mergeți.
Listen, I used to come to this garden with a fresh baked piece of bread. She used to make the breads. She used to work all night. She used to get up during the night to work on the dough. And the breads were real large. So she cut me a piece of bread and I came out here and there were green onions. And I picked some of these green onions and I ate it with the bread and never forgot the taste of it. Oh my God, I never dreamed that I'm going to see this. This is the garden. I told you there was a large garden. You see, the neighbor's house doesn't exist. Only a barn is left. And all these people that were talking about the mill, they really didn't know anything because the mill was here. I can't believe it how small it is. I remember it being 4 times as wide.
Ce avem nu mai
We will.
nu este. Acolo, la alta street.
Bine, venim acolo acasă.
Am văzut în
She's
acasă.
tired, so we're going to go to her house.
Okay,
Now listen.
yeah, we'll go. Thank you. The old woman invited us into her house. She said that out of all the ruin of the old house, she had succeeded in saving one thing. A door. One original door.
Era cuptorul, dar nu mai putem să-l folosim.
She said this was on the site of the end of the house, near where.
Aici,
That's original.
când am venit, trăia mama lui soțul meu, știți? Și atunci am făcut cameră pentru ea, pentru socra mea, știți? Aici a fost pentru o femeie bătrână.
That's the door?
Yeah,
Și aia, ușa a fost.
That's original door.
Cum a la noi, așa că
Was the site of the house.
Eu de multe ori când pun mâna pe asta, pe ușă, mi-aduc că cine mai a rămas puțină urmă de la cine a fost aici în casă, totdeauna și așa mă doare inima, că și eu tot așa sunt.
She said that every time she puts her hand on that lock, she wants to
Totdeauna așa mă gândesc.
remember the people, she said, that no longer exist. And she said she knows that what means to us because she said she left her home. She had to leave her own home.
Putem deschide. La mine e cam dezordine.
Yeah, that's where my grandparents, that's the border.
Ieri am avut musafiri, a fost copii acasă și acum așa puțin. Vă poftiți mai înăuntru. Haideți.
I grasped it without thinking, out of compulsion, not out of guilt. The longer I held the latch, the more I knew that this was it. The closest that I would ever come to knowing them. Their voices, their smells, their loves and passions and dreams. This is the only grave that they will ever have. And it was something that I needed.
Pe mine mă doare că și eu sunt în situația în care sunteți.
It wasn't long before the woman who had saved the doors began to reveal why she had done it.
Anul 42. Și atunci soțul mi-a ajutat, că era foametea, era lipsuri, război. Și atunci a zis, hai aici într-o țară vecină, domnule, puteți să-i spuneți la doamnă că cum s-a întâmplat cu mine. Știți, era război, eu eram în Ucraina, în Transnistria, lângă Odessa, aproape de Odessa. Și soțul a spus, deja s-a știut că ce necaz și acolo în Germania, și a zis, hai tu în țara vecină, că dacă se termină războiul, mai repede vii, mergi acasă. Și am venit aici și pe urmă m-am căsătorit aici și nu m-am mai dus nicăieri.
El a fost din România?
Da, era de aici. Dumneavoastră cunoașteți absolut limba română, nu? Înțelegeți tot spuneam.
Da, înțeleg tot.
Era și familie de evrei. Eu chiar unde...
L-a spânzurat atunci acolo.
Da, la Odessa era fire de telegraf. Da? Și era așa mult spânzurați că așa ajuns oamenii cu picioarele la pământ. Da. Și pe copii i-a adunat în căsi și a dat cu benzină și a dat foc.
I know about it.
Da, a dat foc la casa unde erau copii. Și unde am stat eu tot la țară, am stat, era directorul școlii unde am fost, că am lucrat în învățământ acolo. Era evreu, Iosif Cotman. Și într-un timp i-a adunat pe toți într-un orașel, așa, pe toate familiile i-a adunat acolo și săracii oamenii credea că nu-i face nimica. Pe urmă a venit un ordin, pe toți i-a dus cum i-a apucat, i-a dus în Valea Gosului, așa, i-a dus într-un orașel și i-a pușcat pe toți. Cotman era cel mai bătrân evreu. Pe el l-a lăsat la urmă, știți? A făcut așa un șanț mare și pe toți a pus pe marginea șanțului, pe toți oamenii. Pe Cotman l-a lăsat să vadă tot și după ce a fost gata a spus, nu, acum acopere. Și a acoperit.
Cotman was the last one they shot. Because he was the director of the school, he was a personality. Okay?
El avea fată, avea copil micuț și dacă a văzut că vreau să tragă, a pus copilul așa în față, credea că o să le fie milă la aia care trag copilul.
She took the baby and she kind of showed it to the soldier, hoping that the soldier would have pity on the baby, but they were shot.
Foarte mare. Necaz a fost foarte mare.
I know about Odessa, the whole town. I tell you what happened
Acum
in
eu vă
Odessa.
spun toate, dar să nu mă spuneți undeva cineva să mă tragă la răspundere, că de ce spun eu toate astea.
She's there, she's going to tell us something else. But we shouldn't tell where we got this information because she is afraid. Oh, she said she has...
Bărbații, dacă vreți să beți puțină țuică, țuică românească, să românească.
I think I need a shot of țuică.
Yeah. I think we all do.
Să vedeți cum este să pun asta puțin așa.
Cum vă cheamă? Pentru că vreau să spun fratele meu.
Nu mai vă rog, dacă faceți film și
nu, Doamne ferește.
să nu pățesc eu ceva.
Doamne
ferește. Că eu străină și am pățesc.
El m-a spus imediat că aici nu se poate folosește nume.
Da.
El mi-a spus imediat.
Da. Eu v-am spus că ce am trăit și ce am văzut.
Da.
Și am suferit foarte mult, știți? Da.
Spuneți mai mult, pentru că aș vrea să știu.
Just her first name is fine.
Vă rog, mergeți înapoi la copălărie acolo
unde ați fost 17-18 ani și ce s-a întâmplat acolo, pentru că eu am fost la Auschwitz.
Bine că ați reușit să trăiți, să nu păseți ceva.
Da. Eu am fost la Auschwitz. Cartea... Uitați-vă, vedeți?
Da.
Este numărul.
Da.
Și Ozias a fost acolo cu mine.
Da.
El are 93 și eu am 92.
Da, eu am citit
I'm telling you that Ozias
la un scriitor
number 93 on the end and I have 92.
Fabrica morții, așa a fost carte. Și acolo am citit suferințele și ce s-a întâmplat și câtă lume a murit.
Spuneți acum ce ați vrut încă să ne spuneți ceva despre localitatea, despre evrei, ce a făcut cu evrei.
Spun că asta a fost. I-a spânzurat, pe copii a distrus, i-a pus în clădiri la Odessa și a dat cu benzină și a dat foc acolo, să tot copiii acolo. I-a dus din comuna de unde am fost eu și v-am spus că i-a adunat într-un orașel pe toți evreii din raza așa mai mare a raionului sau i-a adunat acolo ca să-i aibă pe toți adunați. Și femeia eram vecini și eu, cum eram tânără învățătoare acolo și fetița era elevă la mine și era așa, alta șapă. Și femeia aia atât a plâns și a zis către mine, ea, pe Sonia o chema pe fetiță, barem pe Sonia, pe fetiță să o iau eu cu mine și să mă duc de o altă localitate să nu știe nimeni că fetița e de evreu. Și avea așa o legătură, ce știu, lenjerie sau ce avea. Și a zis, uite, eu dă mie aia toate ca să iau pe fetiță, să scot, să nu moare. Eu n-am avut curajul, că mă gândeam că dacă știe cineva că i-am luat un copil de evreu, mă pușcă și pe mine. Și după aia i-a pușcat pe toți. Atunci, la Valea Gosului i-a dus pe toți și i-a pușcat și pe ea.
She said she was very much afraid she couldn't do it. Because the truth is, if they catch her, she's dead. You know what I mean? She said, I'm sorry, she said, I just didn't have enough courage to do it.
Crudități, sălbăticii, ceva neomenesc. De ele n-am mai pus niciodată. Poate acum iară se repete așa, acolo în Orient sau nu știu unde se mai întâmplă și acum în cazul meu. Ce a rămas de copii, că a fost copii și a plecat, am pus și lor și...
I will take it. First I'll take this.
Tell her that none of us know what we would do in a situation that she was confronted with.
Yeah. You need to tell her that.
Vărul meu, să nu vă fie rușine că nu ați luat copilul ăsta. Pentru că noi știm, dacă ați fi luat copilul, ați fost necăsătorit, ați fost foarte tânăr, va fi omorât pe dumneavoastră.
100%, da. Asta, băiatul meu are o fetiță.
This is a granddaughter. Here.
To life, huh? To life.
To the state of Israel.
Se vede ce țuică.
Who is our best insurance policy? Remember that. Remember that, Israel. That's our best insurance policy. For these things never to happen.
So what do you think your grandparents would think of your family here now?
Well, I hope they are right here. And they are seeing that, my God, they didn't kill us all, that we are gonna, we live and we continue to live and we're gonna have grandkids. Like these two, wow! And they're gonna have children. Lee, how many children are you gonna have?
As many as you want.
Si, merci.
Pentru puțin. Că din inimă vă doresc numai bine să mă
Merci. Merci.
Mulțumesc pentru nimica. Eu vă trăiesc ce trăiți și dumneavoastră acum, că eu știu ce înseamnă suferința și ce înseamnă familia, dar dacă așa a fost sorta, n-avem ce face.
What is he saying?
Cred că aduce aminte că...
Nu, a uitat numele.
Nu, dar aduce aminte că aici a fost.
El spune că sunteți cel mai buni oameni.
Că i-am spălat cămașa.
Nu.
Yes. Da.
Trebuie.
Da.
Știu.
Da.
Să fiți sănătoși, să poate când mai venim pe aici.
Poftiți oricând, până trăiesc, nu știu. Că
O să trăiți.
Știți că sunt bătrân acum, am 85 de ani.
Eu am 82.
Sunteți mai tânăr ca mine.
She is 85.
Wow.
Arătați foarte bun.
Tell her she's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Și arăți foarte frumos, spune.
Dar nu trebuie.
Nu. Vă rog frumos.
Da.
Nu e bine?
Da.
Tot e bine. Și vă iubim.
Da, știu. Să știți că eu... Dar nu trebuie
Nu, știu. Nici nu mai arătați asta.
Știți ce?
Puneți.
Eu din toată inima vă spun că să vă ajut să știți că ce a fost.
Da.
Că ce băjocuri a fost pe evrei și pe mine cine a fost om a dorut treaba asta. Că eu...
She tells me exactly what you said.
Da, eu nu...
She said it was hurting her all this what happened to her neighbors.
Cu indiferența
And
there is no...
Da, nu poți.
And
Când ești om, nu poți să te uiți.
Yeah, she said that's the reason she had to tell somebody.
Don't feel bad anymore. There's something in that door. In that house. In her. That has more value than the guilt I've always felt. She keeps the stories for herself because not God, but rather her heart has commanded her to. She's a Christian, a Ukrainian, but our stories are the same. These people have become just as much my family as any Jew. They remember too. The same stories, the same history, but of their own accord, in their own individual ways. They keep their shrines and their photos without the annual thrashing. Loss is not a uniquely Jewish problem. No, not at all. This is our human problem. All of us in Data Bistra knew that something had been lost. Something that we can never have back. We have only our stories, our remembrances.
Dumnezeu să...
Cineva să vie de la poliție.
Vai!
Now I think I can remember another story. When my grandfather struggled towards his escape from the death march on that dark and rainy night of April of 45, he found himself soon facing a large irrigation ditch. He knew that the Germans might find him at any minute, and the deep darkness prevented him from knowing how deep it was. With no strength left in his starved body, he found himself trapped.
Swimming, I didn't know. I didn't have enough power to lift my hands. I knew I can't swim anymore. So all of a sudden, the sky opens up with a picture of my mother. Just like you saw here, my mother, like this, in the same blouse that she is wearing, she appears on the sky. In a very calm way, she calls me. She said, Shlomo, bist du auf einem guten Weg? It means you are on the right track, just continue. So I went out. From the first ditch, I walk another 20, 30 steps, and there is another ditch. There were 3 ditches. And she urged me on in a very calm way that I'm doing the right thing. I should just have confidence and proceed. So I came out from the 3rd ditch. She disappeared.
Now, when I look at these photos, I see the same faces. But now, they seem to me somehow relieved. Proud even. I feel them there, standing behind me, bright, unharmed, and unafraid. They form a large column, a strong root reaching back far through the centuries. At last I can hear them, quietly and mysteriously whispering, "Du bist aufgegessen Weg. Geh weiter. Geh weiter."
dorul inimii, măi dorule dor. Câte doruri ți-ai dori, măi dorule dor. Nu-ți ca dorul inimii, măi dorule dor. Câte doruri întâlnești, măi dorule dor. Nu-ți ca dorul când iubești, măi dorule dor. Du-te dorul niete, măi dorule dor. La băghița mea din-ntâi, măi dorule dor. Du-te dorul niete, măi dorule dor. La băghița mea din-ntâi, măi dorule dor. Du-te dor și nu mai sta, măi dorule dor.